Hi everyone, my name is Varmar and in this video I'm going to show you my latest Unreal Engine plugin, which is called NetworkModeBlueprints. Now this particular plugin is aiming to solve a problem where you as a developer need to execute some kind of code depending on the net mode and the client or server configuration. And what I'm speaking about explicitly is that let's say you want to execute the following codes. You want to execute this particular execution pin purely on the net client, meaning that no dedicated server, no license server, just basically on a remote client itself. And then you want to execute this particular execution pin purely on a dedicated server, so the server side of the dedicated server. Let's say you want to execute this on a standalone mode, which just supposed to be standalone mode. Let's say you also want to execute this on a license server environment, so only whenever it's a license server. And even furthermore, let's say you want to make a differentiate in between a license server, but the client side of things, or the host side of things. And even furthermore, let's say you want to make a differentiate in between the server side of things purely for the host server itself, meaning the player controller on the host, or any replicated other servers. And I will explain this a little bit further, and that's why the only host Boolean true or false exist here. So let's go and try out each of these nodes, shall we? So I will show you how you can get these nodes. Once you install the plugin, you're just going to go to the plugin section, of course, as usual. You're going to search for Network Mode Blueprints. You're gonna enable this particular plugin, restart your engine, and from there you have access to each of the nodes. Now I have 3 main nodes. I have a fourth one, get node, and then inside this kind of category you have 2 more nodes, right? So in total we are exposing 6 different blueprint nodes, but from there 3 of them is kind of together in a category and the other 3 is kind of on their own. So first is the is dedicated server. Now I would like to mention here that the is dedicated server and the is standalone mode are 2 nodes that also exist in the default Unreal Engine Kismet library, meaning that this is exactly the same thing that Unreal Engine already exposed. This is not new things, but I included them on my own because why wouldn't I? Because this is exactly what the rest of the nodes are aiming to achieve. So even though Unreal exposes it, you don't need to use that. You can just use and be on the same place with my nodes basically. So what does that is that if you search for is dedicated server, you're gonna see the networking tab and you're gonna see the networking mode. Now networking tab is by Unreal Engine, like I said. Kismet system library exposes the is standalone mode and is dedicated server already, but I included both of these so you can just stay on the network mode, which is my plugin. So is dedicated server like this. The next one is standalone mode. Again, you have the networking and the networking mode. The network mode is my category. So right here is standalone mode. The next one is net client. Now this is not exposed. Is client? I don't think so. Yeah, it's not exposed on the default networking. So this is my implementation. So you're not going to see 2 categories from there. Any other node going to appear only in the network mode category. So is net client. This is the third one. And what are these? This is only going to respond true if it's a dedicated server. This only going to respond true if you are in a standalone mode. This only going to respond true if you are a net client, meaning you join to your friend session, you join to a dedicated server, but either way, you're a remote client. You don't have authority, you're a full pure client, right? So that's it. And then the last category, now here we have 3 different nodes. The first one right here is listen server. Is listen server networking mode. Now this will return to you true or false if is a listen server environment, just like the dedicated and the standalone mode. This comes from the actual net mode, which is a C++ code. Is net mode dedicated, is net mode standalone, is net mode listen server. Now basically once you do that, it returns true if it's a listen server, but we all know how in Unreal Engine the host, let's say player one as a host, is a server and also a client, right? So the first one, the actual host, meaning that let's say you as a client, you're joining to your friend's session. Yeah, now your friend is a server and a client together. The listen server who is hosting the session always going to take care of the server side of things and also going to take care of its own client because he's also a client himself. So he will have the client stuff and he will have the server stuff. And that's why these two extra nodes are here below the listen server to actually furthermore separate them. Meaning the get listen client, this will be only return true on the client side of things on the host listen server, right? And then the get listen server, now this is again even more separation, will return true for every single listen server created server side of things. But this also includes replications. And what I mean by that, let's say you have a player controller, right? The player controller in a listen server environment will be executed on the server and on the clients. Let's say you have player one, who is the host, and then you have player 2, 3, 4, who's all joining as a client into the game. Now, if we say is listen server, obviously this will return false for each of the clients that joins to the session, but will return true for the host. But the host will have a replicated version of the client controller for each of the joined clients, and because of that, you would see that isListen server returns true as many times as many clients are joining to this session. Now, if you want to separate it, you would take another branch after that and you would say get listen server, get the server side of things. That would also return true for each of the clients that are joining to the session, unless you don't click this one, only if it's host. And if you click this one, that will return purely and explicitly for the host's server side of things. And this is a good separation that you can use in your code. Let's actually try and it's part of the code. Let's actually try to execute these nodes and see how they function in use case, right? I prepared a couple of print string nodes here, which have some append above them, and the append says is dedicated server, is standalone mode, is net client, is listen server, and server, and is listen server and client. Each of those have a boolean to string conversion, which goes to the B side of the append node. So I can just directly connect here into the boolean nodes, the actual get nodes, and see if they are true or false. So let's do some testing, right? I have some basic input keys here. For first, what we're going to do is the F key. I'm going to connect it into the is dedicated server like this. And the boolean is going to go here, is dedicated server as such. Actually, delete this. So we are going to check with an F key if the dedicated server is true or false. Now with a G key, I'm going to connect it into the is standalone mode, and the boolean will connect to the is standalone mode as such. Now with the F key, we're checking if it's a dedicated server. With the G key, we are checking if it's a standalone mode. And let's connect the H key to the is net client so we can check if it's a net client or not. And let's do some testing, shall we? Let's do first the actual standalone mode. Why not? So let's just set our number of players to be 1. A simple standalone mode, and in new editor or viewport, both works exactly the same way. So if we press our E key, actually, no, sorry, which one F, G, and H, yes. So if we press our F key, it says is dedicated server false, because we are not in dedicated server. If we press G key, is standalone mode true, because we are in standalone mode, as you can see. If we press H key, is net client false, we are not net clients, we are in standalone mode. So these particular nodes perfectly working. Now let's switch it up and let's go to 2 players and let's do a play as a client, meaning that the server going to be started for us in the background, and then we do it in the new editor mode. What does that mean? It means this is a client, and it means this one also is a client. So let's try the same things all over again. So is dedicated server false? obviously because we are in a client environment, right? These are clients, this is a client, and this is a client also. If I press G, is standalone mode false because we are not in standalone mode. If I press H, net client true because this is a net client. And also if I go here and I press it, true because these are both net clients. Now, how could I see the dedicated server, right? Because we have a dedicated server. Now, this could be possible if I take the begin event play. I prepared it here. Let's just have the begin event play and actually go right into the is dedicated server, just like this. And now that will return true, and we can separately check the clients, right? Because the server will fire it up, the player controller. So we can do like this. And now we can see that the server is started, the server side of things for both of those clients, a replicated controller, and both of those controllers return server is dedicated server, true. Server is dedicated server, true. Now, of course, both of those clients also executed the begin event play, but both of them returned it false because they are clients and not servers. And that's why in the previous sentence, I mentioned it here, that whenever for example, right, I'm testing in the player controller, whenever the begin play happens, the server will execute the player controller for each client, and also will do a replicated version on the server for each client. And that's why the begin play, if it goes to a dedicated server node, it directly will say 2 times false and 2 times true, because this client version is false, this client version is false, but in the background, the dedicated server created 2 versions, which is both true. So that's kind of the whole logic behind it. Very easy to differentiate the dedicated server logic with this one. Okay, so we are tested the standalone mode, we are tested the clients, and we are tested also the dedicated server. So what does remain? Remains the listen server tests, right? Let's just remove these particular nodes. We know they're working perfectly. And now we are going to test the listen server side of things, right? So is listen server, I'm going to connect this one to here, is listen server. Is listen server and server, I'm going to connect it here, get listen server. And the is listen server and client, I'm going to connect it here, get listen client. So again, a universal is listen server, just a networking mode, separating the server side of things and separating the client, meaning that the client of the listen server and a server of the listen server. And with this one, of course, let's just take our buttons, right? And actually, let's just place them here below each of these, just so we can see it a little bit better. If I press the F key, I'm gonna check if we are in a listen server environment. If I press the G key, I'm gonna check if we are is listen server and a server. And if I press the H key, I'm going to check if I'm a listen server and I am a client myself, right? So it's gonna go each to these nodes. And then what's going to happen right now, let's just go back to our map. By the way, same simple third-person shooter template map, nothing special. We're just gonna go and set ourselves to 2 players, and the networking mode we are going to set to listen server. And of course, new editor window, everything correct. So now this is the listen server, right? Player, let's say player 1, which is the host. This is the server and the client at the same time. And this is a net client who just joined to this particular session. By the way, before we start, let's add another key from here. And we're gonna take this key and we're gonna say this is an E key, right? And we're gonna just check to make sure the pure client side of things. Also, why not? Because now we have a pure client here. Not just in dedicated servers, but the pure client also works in listen servers, meaning that this particular player here, player 2 as a client, if I press this, is this net client true? Because this is exactly a net client, right? Perfect. If I press it here, is this a net client? False, because I'm the listen server host. I am not a net client. But in the listen server host, if I press now the F key, it says, is listen server true? Yes, I am the listen server host, it's true. If I press it in the other one, it says false, well, because it's a net client. If I press the net client, it's true. If I press the server, listen server, false, because this is a net client, right? Let's go back here to the listen server. So we know that listen server is now true for the host. If I press the G key now, that's going to say listen server and the server true also, because I am the listen server and the server itself. If I press the H key, it says listen server and client true. Yes, because I am the client and the server itself as a host listen. So if I go here and press both of those, false going to be. Why? Because I'm a net client. Simple as that. Okay, so now that we know how it differentiates in between them, we also have a good solution to separate all our execution flow. One more important thing is that why have I included an only if host button? And I will show you exactly, okay? So where is the BeginPlay? We deleted, let's just bring it back again, BeginPlay. So from the BeginPlay, I will execute the isListenServer command instead of pressing the H key, right? From the BeginPlay, just like this. And you're going to see exactly why I separated that, right? So actually not this one, sorry. I will do it in the isListenServer and server, very important, right here. So you would expect that it will only be printed out true for the host, right? Because that's what it should be. Let's just play it. False, because now you have it true 2 times, right? You have the isListenServer true 2 times and false 1 time. Who is the false? The false is the remote client who joined. Who is the 2 true? Now the 2 true is you as a host. So as a net host, you are the one who's actually hosting this environment. So it's absolutely true for yourself. But the remote client also true for this one, because like I said earlier, when the player controller gets executed, the server itself will make a copy for each client that joined. And because of that, how many clients have? Well, there is 1 client, me as a host. So for me, obviously going to be true. That's going to be the first one. And the second one is going to be this fellow on the top right corner or the top left corner, who is a net client, but still the server going to replicate a version of his player controller. That's why it's 2 times true. Now, if I would want to say, wait, hold on, I only want to see me as a host and my server environment, then I would say only if host true. And if I do that and I check it and I go back again, now it's going to be 2 times false, right? And 1 time true. Who is the 1 time true? The 1 time true is me as the host and my server environment. The false is going to be this fella and his server environment, and the other false is going to be his fella and his client environment. Okay, so we kind of, that's why I did it. And now I will show you an interesting thing. You could technically, just by using listen server, replicate these 2 kind of nodes yourself if you want to. So the isListen server, just a net mode isListen server. And if you have that net mode, actually, let me just take this out from here. So if you have the net mode, which right here is listen server, so you can get the net mode, technically you could, let's do a BeginPlay. Technically, you could also replicate it. So as you can see, it's a little bit more than these 2 nodes. Let's just copy these, right? And I'm going to insert them just for you to see. So like a comparison, you know? So example 1, this is how you would replicate these 2 nodes. You would say that is listen server, you go into a branch and you say true, okay? And then you go into a sequencer, where the sequencer is the actual separation that we do here, because this line here, it says is local controller true, then it's a client, but then has authority, and then get player controller 0, and then self, and it's equals, then it goes to the branch. If it equals, then it's a server on host. If it's not, then server but replicated. And how I can show you that it's exactly like that. What happened before when we executed our code like this? What happened is that we got 2 false and 1 true, because like a minute ago how I explained it, if we would execute it with this particular stuff, we would get the same 1 true and 2 false, but it would separate it this way. Let's just start it. And now it says, it was a bit quick. Let's just do it again, but with a bit more extended period, like so I want to see the logs itself. Let's just do it this way, and also let's just do it this way, right? So I see them a little bit more. Okay, let's execute them again, just like this. So you see, I am a client, I am a server on host, and I am server but replicated. And that's exactly what I said to you, is that you have a client, you have a server on the host, and you have a server, but you have a replicated version of it. The server on host, it's if you only if host, if you tick this, that's going to be only on the host. If you do not tick this, that's going to also include the replicated versions of it. And then the get listen client will be the client itself. And that's exactly what these kind of long nodes do. So you could kind of rebuild it this way, but instead I just made these simple nodes, and you just need to drop this and do it accordingly. So basically this is my plugin, and that's how you can use it. You can differentiate between dedicated servers, standalone mode, remote clients, and listen servers. Where is it? Listen server. Let's get back here. Okay, so you can differentiate between dedicated servers, standalone mode, remote clients, and also listen servers. And inside listen servers, you can differentiate between the client of the listen server, player one obviously, or the server side of the listen server, which if you tick the only if host, gonna return just the host player one's server environment. If you do not tick it, then it will return true for every single host executed server side of things, but also replicated ones, meaning that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, and the host creates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of the player controller server side. Then if you do not tick this, all will return. If you tick this, then only the actual main hoster player one will return true. Why? Because under the hood, what I do is I check for get player controller, and if you tick this, then the get player controller player index 0 will return, meaning it's always going to be the host, right? So that's why I said you can replicate, you can rebuild this like this, or you can just use two get nodes, which is way more easier. And then again, the dedicated and the standalone mode already exposed by Unreal Engine. I just added the remote client one, I added the listen server one, and I further separated into client and server, and even furthermore I separated into only for the host or the replicated versions also. Now I hope you find this informative. I hope you enjoy the plugin, and thank you very much if you purchase it, and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video. Bye bye.